And so this is a deconstruction of the Digipak by Morrissey, Born a Drag. And straight away we can see that this is a very heavily focused on the artist himself, as that's what the picture takes up. We can see that the lettering and the writing font is quite old and medieval looking, as if to suggest and connote Morrissey's love for everything old and history. And again, going back to the picture, it's quite an unusual image to use for the front of an album, as it's not like necessarily very clear, and it's quite blurred out, and it's got sharp, as you can see. But this album is a compilation album by Morrissey, and it was released originally on October the 15th after a set of singles were released, because he wanted to see if he could break the market through his solo career in that way. However, he did then release this album, and the album features an array of songs from his solo career after the Smiths, and most of the other songs on this album had never been heard before. The original LP of this album, because that's the format that it was in originally, and the sleeve of it was taken from Morrissey's song November Spawned a Monster promotion video, and Morrissey's shirt colour was actually red in that, but then for the 20th anniversary release they changed it back to black, and this is what this album is. It's a 20th anniversary re-release that they did for this album. And also they decided for the inner artwork to have pictures that have never been seen before, and that they were chosen by Morrissey. But anyway, still on the front, it's not a white background either, it's just off-white. And then on the side we just simply have Morrissey bowing around and then the sorting codes. The back, however, is another picture, and again, this is not a sharp image, it's quite blurred. That could suggest because it was taken at the time, so maybe Canadian technology was not best then. However, it's interesting that he still decided to use perhaps older images. And then down here we have a list of all the songs, and there's bonus tracks here, and 15 to 20 had never been released before until they were on this album, the original album. So altogether there's 20 songs on this, which is quite a lot for one album. But this is because he released singles before he decided he wanted to do an album. It's quite interesting the fact that his pitch takes up the majority of it while the writing is just to one side, and this again could suggest the branding towards the artist, and really because he is solo trying to get his image across and his brand across after his split from the Smiths. His songs are very Morrissey-esque, and then a lot of the lyrics would be perhaps to own interpretation, however do have a deeper meaning, which Morrissey never necessarily would speak of, but did a lot of the time have political meanings, and this did start from when he was in the Smiths and had songs such as Panic, which were related to rodeo stories, and there was different stories saying it was about Jimmy Savile and such. But a lot of Morrissey's songs have interesting titles, and this can relate a lot to the singer-songwriter genre, because a lot of them are about love or have more unique, peculiar names. For an example of this, he has a song called November Spawned a Monster, he has one called Hairdresser on Fire, one called The Last of the Famous International Playboys, and then on the bonus tracks he has ones called The Bed Took Fire, which could have connotations of suggesting sex and passion, or then it could have connotations of virginity. So again, it's own interpretation and what you want to believe, really. Okay, so opening this up, we have this one picture that's kind of scored across the whole opening, and these pictures have never been seen before, and Morrissey chose them himself, which again give evidence for the singer, artist, brand, solo, alone sort of thing. And I think that this picture reinforces that, like, with the fact that it is so, like, secluded where he is, and he is on his own, like, that it could be a connotation that in the singers industry you are alone, like there's no one there for you. Or perhaps this could be a connotation to him himself, like how he wants to be, and that he wants to be alone and he wants to live like that. But as we can see, it's a black and white photo kind of leading on from the front cover, and also the back, it's all black and white. Again, this could be a connotation to Morrissey's historical, or the fact that he wanted to keep it simple, and that's another prime example of this genre, that most of the albums and everything to do with it is quite simple, quite laid back. The videos are not necessarily crazy out there big productions, they are quite simple and low key. And then if we pull out this here, it's just a paper card, and on the front again has a picture of Morrissey, but this time he's outside Hollywood High School. As we know, Morrissey did not go to school in Hollywood, he is English from Manchester. So it's kind of contradicting where he came from. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that this person in this picture, where it's quite typically a abandoned English area that could be an inner city in the 60s, really, looking at it, if you didn't know how old he was, like, that's what it looks like. But then this is completely different. It's like a happy man, like, outside a sunny Hollywood school. And then we're back to the British view, where it's not necessarily the nicest place. It's interesting the fact that he decided to choose these locations that didn't look particularly attractive to the eye, but that's still where he wanted to have focused in these pictures. As we can see, the building is more of a prominence than he is. He is much smaller compared to the rest of the picture. And this sign says "Danger, Keep Out," which could again suggest to the loneliness, as there is a song on this album called "Please Help the Cause Against the Loneliness." So that again could, because in all these pictures he's alone, so that could connote it. And again, it's graffiti, and another not necessarily nice or attractive to the eye area. This time Morrissey is more centred, but it is still not necessarily a main focus. I would say the buildings and the graffiti behind you would concentrate on more than him himself, which could connote that if he is blending into the background and it's not necessarily of that much importance. Again, reinforcing the loneliness, simple approach of these albums. On this side, it just has the songs who were written by Morrissey and who else they were written by, and when it was released and the copyright. And the sleeve was by Morrissey, so Morrissey had a big input into this, and I believe that is very generic of this singer-songwriter sort of genre, as they are more independent and have more input into their own brand, as it were. And then we have another picture. Again, Morrissey is not necessarily main focus, but this sign is here. He's looking up. In none of these pictures is really looking at the camera, except from this one and this one on the back. He never really is focusing that much onto the camera, which could connote a kind of distance from maybe the audience and himself, and maybe his connection is through music, and that is the only thing that he can get through. And moving on to the actual CD, which is in this slot here, it is completely different to the rest of the album, as the rest of the album is black and white, and this is bright orange with huge bold writing on. But it's interesting to see that the majority of the writing and the main focus is actually Major Minor, which is the record label, and not Morrissey, which is small, and the album below and all the songs in between. This is a small focus compared to this, which could connote that maybe the that record label does have more of an input than we first believe. But Major Minor is actually an Irish record label, and it was started in 1966 by Phil Solomon. And on this record label at that time, they had artists such as Johnny Nash and the Dubliners. They were brought by EMI in July 2010, and EMI announced that the label would release the expanded 20th anniversary release of the album, and that's what this one is. It's the 20th anniversary release. So by looking at this album, it connotes that the record label did want to have some input into this, and maybe having the sleeve and the packaging more focused on Morrissey's interpretation of this album and Morrissey's personality and the simple nature of it. The record label decided to put their mark on the CD, because obviously they're going to have an input somewhere, and people buy these albums mainly for this disc here. So it's interesting that they had their main mark on this, and basically the artist Morrissey allowed it because this is the main focus. So